All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, we are joined by a brand new friend. His name is Austin Noll, and he wrote an amazing book called A Jumble of Crumpled Papers. And it is subtitled A Church Kid's Journey from Confidence to Questioning to Christ. And so, Austin, welcome to the podcast. I'm excited to connect with you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad you enjoyed the book. First of all, that's great.
It was great. I didn't know
Appreciate
what
it.
to expect. I knew it was going to
Yeah.
be a story, but you took your story and you tied it into some really important things. And I came away going, yes, me too.
Good. That was the point. That was the whole reason I wrote it, was so people who had gone through similar things could recognize those things, could discern those things, kind of work through those things and know that they weren't alone. So that was a successful achieved goal.
You accomplished it. Well
Great.
done. Well done.
Love it.
All right. So before we get too far into things, maybe
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about yourself other than writing this awesome book. Who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, so my name is Austin Noll. I was born in Los Angeles, California. That is where both of my parents moved from different parts of the country, and where they met and where they first found the church. That's where they became Christians and all that kind of stuff. So I was born into it in LA, and for 18 years grew up in church there.
Mhm.
Went to college at UCLA for filmmaking. I'm a screenwriter
Mhm.
and a creative writer. And then when COVID happened, I had some family out in Texas, and I went on a trip out there, and I saw how cheap the apartments were. And I decided to move out here to finish my college, my last year in college, and that was 2 years ago. So now I am out here with my family. They moved out here pretty shortly after, and we're all out here. I am doing some filmmaking stuff and some book stuff, and that's kind of my life right now.
That's
Both
awesome.
sides
So,
of that.
so it's expensive to live in LA, huh?
Oh my gosh. I was living in Westwood, which is right next to UCLA, and you'd think it'd be student friendly, but it is not at all.
Yeah. We used to
Yeah.
live up in New Jersey, just outside of New York City. And it was
Yeah.
the same thing. Like I said to my
Oh
wife, I'm
my
like,
gosh.
everybody in our family has moved away. Why are
Yeah.
we still here? We're gonna go
What
broke.
are we doing here? Why are we paying these absurd prices for a shoe closet?
Yeah, we have like friends
Yeah.
that would work like each husband and wife working two jobs. They can
Yeah.
barely pay the bills. And like, I don't want to live that life. It's
Like, at
too,
what point is it just not worth it anymore? Just move somewhere
yeah,
else and have just a little more freedom to do whatever you want, you know?
exactly. So your
Yeah.
book, this is I think the third deconstruction-ish like book that I've had on the show in the
Yeah.
last month.
Wow.
Deconstruction, yeah,
Yeah.
rethinking faith, like all that stuff is like the hot topic right now. So my first question is like, why your book? What makes your book different? I mean, obviously it's your story, but what's like the
Sure.
unique twist that you bring to this conversation that maybe other people aren't bringing?
Yeah, I've read a lot of similar books.
Hmm.
Of course, in this period of time, that's what you do. You soak up knowledge from people who've gone through the same thing. So
Yep.
I've been through a lot of those books, and they're all fantastic.
Hmm.
And I think, at least from my perspective, what's different about my book is that it is my story, but I'm 24 right now, and I wrote
Hmm.
this book a year ago about my experiences about 4 years ago through my young childhood years. And
Sure.
I think what I wrote this book for was for my younger self, and the perspective is very focused on those youth ministry, middle school, high school, college years,
Hmm.
which a lot of some books tie into a little bit, but that's very much the focus kind of world of the story of the book and what I'm
Yeah.
talking about. So a lot of the focus and ideas I want to challenge and beliefs I want to confront have to do with those years, while also overarching to be universal for anybody going through this. But I think it's really keyed into to younger people, for those who have personally gone through it, or youth ministers looking at their ministries and how they conduct themselves, and parents looking to kind of better understand where their children are at. So that I think that's a unique lens that I'm trying to tell this entire thing through. So
Yeah, and I think that's what I got out of it because the last person I had on the show that talked about his deconstruction book, he was writing about it from the perspective of he was like a private Christian school teacher for 20 years.
interesting.
So he was writing it
Yeah.
from that perspective. Another guy was a pastor. He was writing it from about it from that perspective. But you
Yeah.
came in from these youth ministry kind of years. And
Mhm.
honestly, that awakened a lot in me because I grew up in that world as well. and I was a youth pastor for a long time. And so there's a
Okay,
lot of
so you
different
understood a
things.
lot of it.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah,
lot of different things that I haven't revisited yet in my
sure.
deconstruction. And when you brought something up, I'm like, holy crap, that's another thing I've got to think about, because
No, I'm
there's
sorry
like
for the
a whole
PTSD.
nother, a whole nother thing, a whole nother rabbit hole that I have to go down. But
Yeah,
that's, I think that's the unique twist that you bring to it, is you bring that aspect of that lens, I guess, of a church experience to the table that not everybody's bringing.
yeah.
So yeah.
And kind of what you were saying is because of the fact that for those of you, I mean, for those who have grown up in church or have been there for a
Mm-hmm.
long time, the majority of the people who I've heard back from who have read the book so far are past their 40s, because
Mm-hmm.
the experiences are universal, for the better or for
Yep.
the worse. And
Yep.
a lot of these childhood experiences, while for me, that may be the majority of my life up to this point. For
Mm-hmm.
some people, it may have happened 30 years ago, but it's still the same kind of realm of events and understanding and stuff.
That's
So
right.
that's why I think it's really nice to reach people from all ages. And a lot of people
Yeah.
have gotten good feedback from it. So
There you
yeah,
go. Yeah, I love it. So I realize the book is obviously your story, but I was
yeah.
wondering if you could maybe begin by taking us into it a little bit, and then we'll kind of see, what rabbit holes we decide to go down. But obviously, don't give away all the gems from the book and your story, but maybe
Of
just a
course
little
not.
bit. Give us like an overarching tour of Austin's spiritual life. Like, where did you begin? Where are you now? And some of the steps that got you from there to here.
Okay, the Cliff Notes version.
That's
So,
right.
born into the church.
Yep.
Uh, the book really deals with this overarching theme, which I mean is a universal theme in deconstruction. A lot of people kind of going through challenging their beliefs,
Hmm.
is growing up or for an extended period of time, believing that the glass bowl that is your religious experience is infallible, and every idea you're given is true. And of
Yep.
course, being that's a common phase and process that a lot of people go through that
Yep.
have been through religious systems. But
Hmm.
for a church kid who was born into it
Hmm.
and who never knew a life outside of that, never accepted the beliefs and added them to previous knowledge, but their knowledge in general is founded entirely around that because you never knew anything else.
Yeah.
Um, it's even harder to get to a point where you're finally discerning that maybe all the ideas that you've been taught by leaders and people who are older than you that you have been learned to trust and believe
Hmm.
are would never lead you in a direction that wasn't healthy, to finally be like, okay, so maybe that thing I learned about the Bible or about God or about myself, maybe that wasn't quite true. So for
Hmm.
18 years of my life, growing up being taught that every single thing I learned about God or the Bible or Jesus or church was completely true. And not only so, but our church did it the best. And the straightest way to Jesus was our
Yep.
church and this set of beliefs in this lens and this perspective.
Yeah.
And then going to college and going through a lot of hardships with friends and rigidity with members of the opposite sex, and seeing the control
Hmm.
and the ultra manipulation and trying to just control every single aspect of your life, and going through things with leaders, learning that there were certain things were being taught to me intentionally, untruthfully, and unhealthily, and realizing how the toll it took on my relationships with other people
Hmm.
and my view of God and all that stuff. And then realizing, okay, so not everything here is healthy. How many things here could now not be healthy? Now that I've accepted that one thing may not be as healthy as I believed it would, how many things have I brought on from these 18 years of my life that I need to look at and maybe decide I
Yeah.
need to reevaluate that? And that's the
Yeah.
entire book, is me going through these different things, different sectors of my spiritual upbringing in Christianity, and kind of challenging which things I still believe and which things I don't. The title is A Jumble of Crumpled Papers, and that refers to the metaphor that if every idea or belief that you have come to believe were each written down on an individual slip of paper in your mind and filed
Hmm.
away,
Hmm.
once you start to challenge that and start to realize that maybe that finely organized pile is not all true, it kind of becomes a chaotic jumble in your head, and you have to now set off to cipher through every single idea and kind of intentionally unravel it and decide what you believe about it now, and kind of file it away respectively, if you believe it still or not. So
Yeah.
that's the entire book.
Yeah. And I love how I think it's early on in the introduction you say that when you started writing the book, like you're like, I don't really know where this is gonna go.
Yeah.
And I thought that was
Very
like,
first chapter, because I had no idea.
yeah, and I thought that was so like reflective of the whole process
Yeah.
of deconstruction, right? Because you don't know where it's gonna go. Like you open up that one piece of paper in your mind and you're like, you crumble that one up, and then there's not, you don't know like which one's gonna come next, but the whole
And
thing
where it's
just
going to lead, or what
unravels.
path it'll go down, what will connect to
Yeah.
what, and where you'll end up from where you started. Right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly,
absolutely.
exactly. So in the book, you mention a lot a specific term that might come up in our conversations. Let's get it kind of on the
Yeah.
table is contemporary Christian culture. And that's
Yes.
kind of like that's the thing that we're rethinking. That's the issue that's on the table. So maybe define what that is before we get into the different aspects of it.
Yeah. Contemporary Christian culture, in summation,
Mhm,
is the modern present younger approach to Christian faith.
mhm,
And I mean, as a word for me, I don't know what the dictionary definition is, but for me, the word or the idea contemporary,
mhm,
while experienced, I think by any age, by any generation, at any given point in time, contemporary usually is most influenced, and most influences the generation that is young enough to, like the generation about the 18 to 20-year-olds, millennials, Gen Z, that kind of, at least for our generation right now.
sure.
And that's the generation for me that is young enough to be influenced by all this stuff, but also old enough to actually influence the direction that a lot of the culture is taking in any
Mm,
given sector of life. So contemporary Christian culture right now for me is the way that faith and spirituality and religion is kind of enacted by the current generation, and has a lot to do with I mean, in the book I talk about all about different kind of styles of lifestyle things that are culturally reminiscent of contemporary Christian culture, which is, I talk
mm,
about the Christian kind of dialect, Christianese, the different Christian phrases that we all know, and things like that. And talk about conferences and how people love conferences. Talk about celebrity pastors, how that's a whole fad right now. Celebrity pastors, young pastors that are attractive and talk well and say big words and make big
yeah,
phrases that make people feel a lot of emotion.
yeah.
Um, Emotion in itself is a whole thing about contemporary Christian culture, especially with younger people, but widespread through a lot of different ages right now. And that's been for a while, I think, is Christianity really seeks to hit the emotion and goes for emotional highs,
Mhm,
kind of as an expression of emotional, or as of spiritual, I don't know, conviction, devotion.
mhm.
But contemporary Christian culture is a very wide umbrella of just the different expressions of Christianity right now, that may or may not deviate from what Christianity traditionally is and should be.
Yeah.
And that can be objective or subjective based on what you're talking about. But that's kind of contemporary Christian culture, CCC.
Yeah, and I think that that culture leaks its way into many different streams of Christianity, right? Because you can find like
Absolutely.
I grew up in the Reformed Church, and
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
typically a very, conservative, we just kind of stand there with our arms at our
Sure.
side kind of thing. But yet the
Yeah.
things you're talking about, that's where I was a youth pastor, like that this all leaks into that area. It leaks into
Right.
a Hillsong type place. Like no matter where
Right.
you are in
Absolutely.
Christian culture, the things that you're talking about in the book will be there. So early
Yeah.
on in the book, you made this comment that really kind of resonated with me, and I don't have the quote in front of me, but it's something to the effect that like the church, the entire church system, or I think you use the word like ecosystem, is often built on this pursuit of like making yourself better, of being
Yeah.
like perfect, as opposed to kind of seeking the power of God to impact or change your life on the inside. And I thought
Yeah.
about that, like that was really interesting because like that's been my experience too. And I used to call it the gospel of self-improvement, right? Like
Yes. That's
every
very,
sermon,
yeah.
like in our homiletics class and things like
Yep.
that, like had to be like a 5-step manual. And alliteration is better if everything starts with the same letter, it sounds the same kind of thing. But this
Exactly.
five
Goes up the
step
tongue. Yep.
manual, yeah, to improve your life and to like to make it better. And so that part of the book got me thinking,
Yeah.
and I'm sure you thought a lot about this because you wrote the book. But like, let's
Yeah.
imagine for a minute, what might it look like for a church to teach people to pursue the power of God to change them on the inside, as opposed to merely trying to be more perfect or to have these 5 steps come into my life and make me a better person? Like, what is the difference between those two things, and what would it look like for a church to pursue the power versus just
Yeah.
the outer change?
I think that was a great segue, because I think one of the things about contemporary Christian culture is, at least from what I've observed and has been for a long time, is this
Mhm.
pursuit of perfection or bettering yourself,
Yep.
um, to
It's
fit in
me,
the
me, me,
church,
me, me.
to do
Yeah.
different things. Right. It's all me trying to. I think a lot of ways the bettering of yourself has been equated with the growing of your spirituality and your faith, right, and
Yeah.
the deepening of your
True.
faith.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes it's an intentional structural thing implemented to control people and to guide them
Mhm.
a certain way. And
Mhm.
sometimes it's unintentional, because it's very easy to slip into that train of thinking when there's not many other ways to easily be able to perceive someone's faith level outwardly,
Mm.
in a very uniform way from person to person.
Mhm.
So some people, we've unintentionally or intentionally added these kind of gates here that are kind of checkpoints for, oh, we see you're growing in your faith because you're doing this,
Mhm.
or your life looks like this, or you respond with this when someone says this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
And what that is, and a thing, another reason too why that in contemporary Christian culture, at least for young people especially, and all ages too, but an approach that my generation and around has taken to church and to Christianity is, I mean, young people love goals. Young
Mhm.
people love working towards something and being unified in a cause. And we found, recently in history, young people found a lot of causes that are great that we've unified together to try to enact change in different things.
Mhm.
And it's been successful in a lot of ways. And there's a unifying power in people using their energy to do something good and to better society and better themselves.
Mhm.
And the problem is, we take that to church and it doesn't work that way,
Mhm.
because all that does is lead people down a pathway that ultimately can lead to a lot of shame,
Mhm.
because there are standards set up for people that they can't meet,
Yeah.
and they feel like, oh, I need a goal here. I need an aim. What does being with Christ look like? Oh,
Yeah.
it looks like this. I need to do this and get here and tithe this and serve here and say this. And a lot of the time, no matter where we are, there's always kind of a farther way to go, because the goalposts are moved.
Yeah.
And it's so important to get in that space where Christ is leading you from the inside out and then leading you to do these things, and not bettering yourself, but just focusing on your relationship with and growing from the inside. Because that's the only way. I always think about the word authenticity a lot lately.
Mhm.
Authenticity is so important for so much of the wellness of spiritual communities, especially in this context. But it's hard to gauge when it's not an outward expression. But
Yeah.
I don't know. That's what I have to say about that, really.
Yeah, and I think what you said about moving the goalpost
Yeah.
and creating this standard that you can't possibly meet. Like,
Right.
looking back on my years as a pastor, there's something very manipulative that goes on at a subconscious level, I think, in the mind of a
Yeah.
pastor, because if you can keep the standard so high and move the goalpost ever so far every Sunday, it keeps people coming back. I mean, that's the
Right.
name of the game. I mean, you
Right.
especially as a pastor, like, you feel the pressure from the board and from people, like, you got to get
Right.
butts in the pews, because the people come in the pews, they put the money in the plate, keeps the lights on, keeps the bills paid. Like, there's this
Yeah.
whole other political pressure that goes on for a pastor. So when you're creating your sermons and you're preaching this stuff, if you could just keep that, if people are reaching for the goal and they're getting there, but you move it back like a carrot a little bit more, it keeps
Right.
them coming back. And I think that just, so there's such a manipulation piece there, that I think if a pastor's not aware that that is there and you're
Right.
not guarding yourself against it, it's very easy to go down that path. And I know I've gone down that path before.
Sure. And I know many people have just learned that from generations and growing up, and that's the way it's done.
Yep.
And they don't I truly believe that while there are people with malicious intent, absolutely, there are many people who are just doing what they believe church is, because that is what church has become in a lot of contexts.
Yep.
And to them it's, oh, I'm helping this person grow.
Yep.
I'm leading them to a deeper faith. I'm challenging them, but it's not leading them towards Christ, it's leading them more towards shame and self. I mean, it's just shame, really.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah. But that's the theology a lot of us, like you said, we were brought up with. And so it's normal. It's normal to be ashamed of yourself. It's normal to feel like I can't possibly measure up. It's normal to feel like there's something wrong with me. And so like what
performing.
Yeah. And so as a pastor, like, well, I have to make people feel that because that's the way you're supposed to feel. So until you step out of the box and you start to get to this place where you and I are, where we're kind of looking in the box going, I don't know if that's really the best way to approach God and to approach faith and things like that. So yeah, that's really good. Another thing I want to talk to you about, because this came up for me. I haven't thought about this since I read your book. I mean, but this is something that was a huge part of my life. And that's the piece about the cry nights.
Oh my
talked
gosh,
about
cry nights.
In the book.
Okay.
And so I think a lot of our listeners, some of our listeners will be familiar with this, but a lot of them will not. I am, and I have stories. So who knows what PTSD is going to come up right now?
Yeah.
I have so many stories, but talk to us about what these cry nights are, what they were. What was your experience with them? And looking back now, looking in the box, standing outside, looking in, why are these things so problematic?
It's interesting because when I wrote the book and all the years before writing the book, I had no idea what cry night even was, because my church didn't call it cry night. My church called it confession night. And I think that may have been better to disguise the intent behind it, because it wasn't known as this night where you cry. It was known as the night where you confess your sins. And funnily enough, not until writing the book did I even know my parents had no idea this was even going on at church. I assumed there was a thing that all the parents had set up, and they knew was happening at camp. At night, you would sing these really emotional songs and go in a small group and confess all your sins to this leader and there's other people in your group. And I assumed it was this thing that was condoned by the parents and everyone knew about it, but they had no idea what was going on in that camp all these years. And I didn't know that it was called cry night in many circumstances. And what cry night is basically what I talked about contemporary Christian culture reaching these emotional highs. It's a night at youth camps, usually teen camps, whatever, where they bring out the most emotional songs. They bring out extended choruses. They sing riffs over and bridges over and over and over again, and they get people feeling so unified. And what they're really seeking is that emotional expression, whether it's through tears, whether it's through exhaustion, whether it's through all these different things, because it's equated and known as, if you do that, then you've really had your breakthrough and really experienced Christ or the Holy Spirit or whatever you have it, right? And I remember one thing that wasn't in the book was I didn't put together afterwards, was the fact that this idea of a breakthrough. Every year after camp, we would have what we call an afterglow, which the first Friday after coming back from camp, all the campers meet with all the leaders and all of their parents in this giant end of camp kind of reflection. And they bring people to talk about their experiences, the leaders share about the campers and all that kind of stuff. And every single year, there were always those 3 or 4 or 5 kids who everyone knew, oh, they had their breakthrough. And the team leader would share at this afterglow, oh, this camper so-and-so had a breakthrough at camp. And what I realized later was, oh, wait a minute, those were just the kids that were seen really having a visible expression of emotion during usually confession night, or at some point during camp. They had some breakdown episode, or they had some whatever else, just a really expressive moment. And going back to outward betterment, they took the outward expression as, oh no, that was him seeing Christ. And a lot of churches do altar calls that night, because when these kids, young people, are at their most emotionally vulnerable, they are most open to being manipulated and affected to change. And they have altar calls, and tons of people, if you talk to a lot of people who grew up in church, they'll say that one of their moments when they came to Christ was during these altar calls. And I'm not saying it's inauthentic, because a lot of people still fully believe that, and those moments were very important for them. But for a lot of people, those moments they'll look back on and go, okay, I was totally manipulated to feel things that were equated with the Holy Spirit or God, and they were just me feeling tired and hungry and sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it like all that stuff resonates with me. I went to a Bible college, and so we
Yeah.
had chapel like every Thursday or Wednesday or whatever it was.
Sure.
And it was in the gymnasium, so it's pretty much the whole school is there.
Mm-hmm.
And there was always a worship time. And like you said, it was the same songs with long choruses, and would
Yep.
always get louder kind of at that moment of the climax of the song, and they'd always
Yeah.
have room up in the front for people to come up and to get on their knees and to pray and things like that. And there always be an altar call after the sermon or the message and things like that. And what I began to notice, and I especially see it now kind of looking back, is that there was an inner circle of students
Mm-hmm.
there. And that inner circle of students was always the students who were having the most powerful moments,
Yeah.
up front. And that's not to say, like you said, like I don't want anybody to think that like we're shaming that whole
Oh
experience, because
no.
there's a lot of good that can come out of it. I know there's a lot of
Sure.
people who have benefited immensely from that, who, would say absolutely had an experience with God in those moments, things like that. So it's
Yeah.
definitely possible. But I think
Sure.
it's also can be very manipulative. And I look at it from my perspective of thinking to myself, I remember sitting there thinking, so I can't be in that inner circle unless I'm
Right.
having that experience. But the problem is I don't feel anything right now.
Right.
So I can pretend to put my hand in the air. I can pretend that like I'm having this experience. I've gone up
Right.
to the front before. I've been teary-eyed, because the music can make you feel teary-eyed depending
Yeah.
on what your life circumstance is that day, things like that. But I don't really feel anything. So therefore there must be something wrong with me. Now I'm
Right.
already a person who struggles with shame, because I've already, because of my past and my childhood, things like that, like different instances with like my father, different teachers, things like that. Like
Mm.
I've always struggled with that inner voice that says I'm no good. And so now I'm feeling no good in chapel, like the one place where I think I should probably feel some sort of goodness of God's presence. I'm feeling like a major loser, because I'm getting this degree in Bible. I'm supposed to have like a degree in God. And so I'm supposed
Right.
to, right. So I'm supposed to have like, if anybody should be able to feel something, it should be me, but I feel
Yeah.
nothing. And so
And
like,
you
what's
nailed
going
it.
on? Yeah. And then again, it keeps you coming back. Cause like, well, if I didn't feel it this week, maybe I'll feel it next week. And
Right.
maybe I'll hit different buttons on the vending machine this week. And when I come back next week, something different will happen. But it
Right.
never did. And I
You
felt
being
so much
authentic,
shame. Yeah, for
you
such a
being
long
authentic
time.
to what you felt made you feel like you weren't measuring up.
Yes.
And that's exactly, I mean, so many people that I've heard, I was on a Reddit thread for 2.5 hours going through all people's their experiences about cry nights.
Talk about doom
And
scrolling.
so many of them just out like out scrolling, man. And it was astounded me how many people how many people's stories were about them not feeling or feeling something, but not enough to cry about it or do all this stuff. And
Yeah.
because of that, they felt, oh, am I not reaching as deep as these people are? Is my faith not deep enough? Am I not really seeing Christ as clearly as they are? And what
Yeah.
that does is just makes you feel shame. And they're the ones usually being most authentic. I'm not saying people who are expressive are not being authentic. Many of them are being authentic, but
Yeah.
also there's a pressure to express a little more than you usually are in that context, because you know that it's equated with something good and
Yeah.
something that's expected of you.
Yeah.
And that brings on a lot of shame for a lot of people.
Yeah. Man.
Yeah.
I have so many stories.
Oh, I
It's
want
like
to
a
hear them.
Rolodex
You
in
got to
my
tell
head
me
right now.
sometime.
Someday I have one story that I haven't told you here. Maybe we'll
Yeah,
have you back on and we'll explore this at an
I'd
even
love
deeper
to.
level, and we'll
We
talk
should.
about
It's a
the
whole
stories.
discussion on itself. It goes so deep. Absolutely.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people have had that experience. 'Cause I know a lot of my listeners come from kind of a more Pentecostal kind of background, where it's
Sure.
the emotions
Yeah,
play a huge role in it. And I have people have said to
absolutely.
me, like, I haven't always felt those emotions, even though people around me do. And so I think
Yeah.
that would be not a fun thing, but I think that would be a good thing for us to unpack
It'd be really
a little
interesting.
bit
Oh
of a
yeah,
deeper level. Yeah. All right. So
absolutely.
last question. I want to talk to you
Okay.
about indoctrination. You have a section in the book about this. And I think it's really great because
Yeah.
over the course of my deconstruction, I've come to realize that a lot of what I thought was education was really indoctrination. And
Hmm.
I talked to my wife about this the other day, and I said, we went to the same Bible college. I then went to get my master's at the seminary that was part of the Bible college, got my doctorate from there. And the school was very big on like education, like educating its students and A,
Sure.
B, and C and X, Y, and Z and all those different things. But now that I'm out of there and I started my deconstruction process in that world, which was a whole mess in and of itself. But now that I'm kind of
Yeah.
out of that world and I'm having this podcast, I'm having conversations with people like you. We've had like Bart Ehrman on the show and like
Oh, yeah,
Elaine
sure.
Pagels and some people who are have a huge piece of knowledge about
Yeah.
the entirety of Christianity, not just one little segment.
The
I said to my
whole
wife,
pie. Yeah.
yeah, I said to my wife, I'm like, I'm realizing that like I've spent so much time in school. I said, I feel like
Yeah.
I know nothing. I said, I know very
Wow.
much.
That's
I know very
so
much about
accurate.
this, but I don't know anything about all of this.
Yeah.
And I said, it's so frustrating to me. So I'm wondering if we can just get your thoughts about this
Yeah.
whole piece about indoctrination in the church, what that looks like, what it means, all that kind of stuff.
The first thing I thought, I don't even know
Hmm.
if I said this in the book. I'm sure I
Yeah.
did somewhere, but there is a if you take five different religions specifically,
Hmm.
you take, I mean, five different religions, right? And you ask each of them, what is the answer to life? They will give you five varying answers that share some things and are different on some things. But the
Sure.
problem is, they would each teach you these as if they were the absolute, undoubted truth.
Hmm.
And the problem with that is, if you get five absolute, undoubted truths that are all kind of contrary to one another in different ways, that leaves you in a place where you question whether all of any of them are.
Hmm.
And growing up in a specific Christian church, right? You're taught so many things that are absolutely true about specifically the way the church is and the way God is.
Hmm.
And you're taught, I mean, in many churches, in my church specifically, that I learned was we believed we were the one true church. And many
Hmm.
churches believe that. And if
Yeah.
you look at five different churches and they each believe that, you go, oh, I don't think the math adds up there. We can't all be the one true church, unless we
Right.
all are. But
Right.
um, and the thing about that is the indoctrination aspect comes in when you're taught to believe some of these things so certainly,
Hmm.
as opposed, and at the same time being taught all the things you shouldn't believe. You
Hmm.
certainly shouldn't believe and certainly should believe. That there's a point that comes when you're left with so many certainties that your mind is locked.
Yeah.
There's no opening for any other expressions or any other beliefs that may challenge ones you already have. You've had these certain beliefs, you've cemented them, you've been taught to lock them down and not question them.
Hmm.
And when you have a mind full of unquestionable beliefs, you've hit the max of capability to grow.
Hmm.
And because of that, you're locked in. And whether or not some of those are good or bad beliefs or whatever, you're now completely a part of kind of a hive mind of the same beliefs, and you're kind of locked into a system. And when you're in a system that you're so reliant on because all your beliefs revolve around it,
Hmm.
there's very little chance that you're going to leave, because there's when you're not much, or you don't believe you're much
Hmm.
when you're apart from that system, because all your beliefs are founded in that one particular place or ideology.
Yeah.
And many people don't ever leave because they've now kind of compromised their individuality for this group part. If that makes sense in a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a way that, I know many churches are unintentional because that's just how they've learned to do certain things, but
Mhm.
many of them do that as a way to gain people and to keep people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I look back on like my professors in school, and I had this conversation with somebody a while ago on the podcast, but I kind of came to this conclusion. Like, I don't think anybody, I mean, there are people out there who are purposely manipulative. There are people out there
Sure.
are those kinds of people. But like,
Yeah.
I don't think in my experience, I don't think anybody was trying to manipulate me. I think they were just showing, they were presenting me with what they've been presented with. And like,
Right. Exactly.
you don't know until you see, you don't really know. And so these were people who hadn't really seen different
Right.
things. And, now that I'm in this place where like, I'm realizing how how wide the umbrella of Christianity is. Because like,
Right.
like I had, taught about hell. Hell's this physical place of fire,
Yeah.
and you go there when you believe
Fire
the
and
wrong things.
screaming and whatever else. Yep.
Yeah, and it's horrible. And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
that never really sat right with me. But I'm like, well, I guess
Yeah.
that's what it is because it's the only way to think about it. And then
Right.
Rob Bell's book came out, Love Wins, and
Right.
I was like, holy smokes, like there's another way to think about
Yeah.
this. And then I'm like, well, I wonder what else there's other ways to think about. And I got
Right.
this book. What is this book? Where is it? Oh, here it is. I got it on my shelf. What is it called? I got to get the right title.
Yeah.
Lost Christianities by Bart Ehrman, The Battles for Scripture and the Faiths That We Never Knew. I remember I got
Interesting.
this book and I'm like, Lost Christianities. Like there's more than
Right.
one.
Plural? Wait a minute.
There's more than one. And so
Yeah.
like that sent me down this rabbit hole. I'm like, wow, there's the early days of Christianity were even more diverse than they are today. And like
Yeah.
that to some people that's horrifying because a lot of people just want to know, just tell me what to believe so I can
Yeah.
get it all right. I could check all the boxes. But for me, I was like, well, all those boxes never fit. And now I'm
Right.
realizing that people have thought differently about stuff for a very, very long time. And I think
Yeah.
that that's what education is. Like, I think education is being able to say, like, hey, this is what I believe, A,
Right.
B, and C. But that's not the only way to believe because there's a lot of these other
Absolutely.
ways to believe as well. And I'm not going to force my beliefs on you. I'd like it
Right.
if you believe this way because it might be easier for us to have a conversation, whatever. But
Right.
you're welcome to believe whatever it is you want to believe. Here's all the cards on the table
Right.
and take it and process it and do what you will with it kind of thing. So
Indoctrination is here are all the things I or we believe. If you
right.
don't comply with these things, you're not going to fit here.
That's right.
Education is here's what we believe, here's what they believe, here's all these pieces of information of all these different parts of this.
Yeah.
It's your life. You can choose what you want here.
That's right.
This is what I believe, but here's all these different things because you need to fill in all these things and choose what fits with you, right?
That's right.
That's the
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah. And that's why we're trying to like raise my daughter. Like we've had family members say like, well, you have to tell her about this, this, and this. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
we will tell her about this, this, and this, but we'll also tell her about that, that, and that, because
Yeah.
she needs to
That's
know
fair.
that this is not the only way to believe.
Yeah.
There's other, because she's going to meet people in her classes and her life who are going to think differently than she does. And she needs to know that
Right.
that's okay. It's okay to
And
think
how much
different.
stronger a faith, how much stronger a belief or an idea that you've chosen rather than it was given and forced upon you, right?
That's right.
If you end up
That's
choosing the same things, then awesome. You chose the exact same things that we kind of wanted you to choose or wish you would choose. But how much stronger it is when you chose it for yourself rather than just being here, choose this or hit the highway, right?
That's right. That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Austin, we are just about out of time, but this has been a lot of fun. Thanks for taking the time to join me, and thanks for this book.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been awesome.
Yeah, for sure. And real quick, where can people go to connect with you online, with you and your work? Best places.
Yeah, best place for me is my Instagram, probably at Austin Noll, AUSTIN_NOLL.
Awesome. I will put it all.
Talk to me.
Yeah, I'll put it all in the show notes, and we'll do it again soon.
Awesome. Absolutely.
All right, man.